The galaxy was vast, endless, and full of wonders. For centuries, humanity had dreamed of reaching the stars, of leaving Earth behind to explore what lay beyond. When they finally achieved it, they found themselves in a universe already occupied by countless other species. These alien civilizations were older, more advanced, and far more powerful than humans. To keep peace, humanity agreed to follow the rules set by the Galaxy Council, an interstellar body that claimed to oversee fairness and cooperation among all species. But as time passed, it became clear that the Council didn't see humans as equals. They saw them as children who needed to be controlled. Daniel Carter sat alone in his lab, staring at the holographic screen floating in front of him, the data. On the screen glowed faintly in the dim light, lines of code and equations scrolling past faster than most people could read. Daniel wasn't like most people. He was one of the brightest minds on Earth, a man who had dedicated his life to solving problems no one else dared to tackle. Tonight, however, he wasn't working on anything new. Instead, he was reading something that made his blood boil. Project Horizon, the ambitious initiative Daniel had poured years of his life into, had been shut down. Officially, the reason given by the Galaxy Council was safety concerns. Unofficially, Daniel knew better. Someone within the Council, or worse, one of their allies, had stolen the project's research. All those sleepless nights, all the sacrifices, all the hopes for a brighter future had been crushed under the heel of politics. And now, the technology humanity had worked so hard to develop would likely end up in the hands of someone else. He clenched his fists, trying to calm himself. It wasn't just anger driving him, it was betrayal. Humanity had done everything the Council asked. They followed every rule, attended every meeting, paid every fee, and still, they were treated like second-class citizens. Daniel leaned back in his chair and sighed deeply. His thoughts turned to Lavra, his wife. She'd know what to say. She always did. Lavra Bennett was different from Daniel in many ways. Where he was analytical and reserved, she was outspoken and passionate. As a diplomat representing Earth at the Council's headquarters on Lyria, she spent her days navigating the complicated web of galactic politics. It was exhausting work, but Lavra believed in humanity's potential. She believed they deserved a seat at the table, even if the Council didn't agree. When Daniel got home that evening, he found Lavra sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea and reading reports on her tablet. Her blonde hair was tied back in a loose bun and she looked tired. "Rough day?" Daniel asked, setting his bag down. "You could say that," Lavra replied, looking up with a faint smile. "How about you?" Daniel hesitated before answering. He wanted to tell her everything, the theft, the shutdown, the frustration, but he wasn't sure how she'd react. Lavra cared deeply about maintaining diplomatic relations, and sometimes that meant swallowing pride. Still, she deserved to. "No, Project Horizon is gone," he said finally. Laura's eyes widened. "What do you mean, gone? They shut it down, pulled the funding, locked us out of the labs. All because the Council says it's too dangerous. That's ridiculous," Lavra exclaimed, slamming her hand on the table. "Dangerous? The technology could have revolutionized energy production across the galaxy. We're talking about clean, sustainable power for everyone." "I know," Daniel said quietly, "but it gets worse. Someone leaked our research. Whoever did it didn't just sabotage the project, they handed it over to our competitors." Lavra stared at him, stunned. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she shook her head and muttered, "I can't believe this. After everything we've done, after all the compromises we've made, they still don't trust us." "It's not about trust," Daniel said bitterly. "It's about control. They don't want us getting ahead. They don't want us becoming equals." Lavra sighed and rubbed her temples. "This isn't going to sit well with the others. If word gets out—" "It already has?" Daniel interrupted. "I heard rumors spreading before I left the facility. People are angry, Lavra, really angry." She nodded slowly. "And they should be. But anger won't fix this. We need a plan." "A plan?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What kind of plan? We can't fight the Council. We don't have the resources or the firepower." No, but we have brains, Lavra said firmly. And determination. Look, Daniel, I've seen how the Council operates. They thrive on division. If we let them pit us against each other, we'll lose. But if we stand together, if we show them that humanity isn't afraid to push back, we might actually stand a chance. Daniel considered her words. He wanted to believe her, but the odds felt insurmountable. The Council controlled entire armies, fleets of warships, and unimaginable wealth. What could a handful of scientists and diplomats possibly do? Before he could respond, Lavar stood up and walked over to the window. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars against the night sky. Do you remember why we started doing this? She asked softly. Why we left Earth to come here? To make a difference, Daniel answered without hesitation. To prove that humanity belongs in the galaxy. Exactly, Lavar said, turning to face him, so let's remind them. Over. The next few days, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. Laura's words echoed in his mind, fueling a fire he hadn't felt in years. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to stop playing by the Council's rules, but where to start? He decided to reach out to some old colleagues, people who shared his frustration and might be willing to help. One of those colleagues was Dr. Ethan Cole, a physicist known for his groundbreaking work on quantum propulsion. Ethan had always been skeptical of the Council, often voicing his concerns during meetings. When Daniel called him, Ethan didn't hesitate to listen. You're telling me they stole your research? Ethan asked incredulously. That's insane. Insane? But true, Daniel replied. And I think it's only a matter of time before they try to suppress other projects too. Ethan frowned. If that happens, we're screwed. Without innovation, humanity will stagnate. We'll become exactly what the Council wants us to be, obedient little workers. Which is why we need to act, Daniel said. We can't let them win. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Okay, count me in. But we're going to need more than just two guys in a lab. This is going to take coordination and guts. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel and Ethan began assembling a small team of trusted individuals. There was Rachel Monroe, a senator, famous for her fiery speeches criticizing the Council. There was Adam Hayes, a tech billionaire who specialized in cutting-edge stealth technology. And there was Commander Grace Mitchell, a decorated military officer with a reputation for tactical brilliance. Each member brought something unique to the table, and together they formed the backbone of what would eventually become known as the Unity Coalition. Their goal was simple: protect humanity's interests and ensure its survival in a hostile galaxy. But starting a rebellion wasn't easy. Every step forward seemed to be met with another obstacle. Funding was scarce, resources limited, and the risk of exposure constant. Still, they pressed on, driven by a shared sense of purpose. One evening, as the group gathered in a secret underground bunker to discuss their next move, Rachel stood up and addressed everyone. Listen, I know this feels impossible, she sighed, her voice steady and strong. But impossible is exactly what we're aiming for. The Council thinks we're weak, that we'll roll over and play nice. Well, guess what? We're done playing nice. Her words resonated with the group, sparking a renewed sense of determination. They weren't just fighting for themselves anymore. They were fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. As the meeting came to a close, Daniel caught Laura's. She smiled at him, and for the first time in weeks, he felt hopeful. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but they weren't alone. Together, they would find a way to reclaim their future. Little did they know, the Council was already watching. The Unity Coalition was growing, but it wasn't easy. Every decision felt like walking on thin ice. The group knew they couldn't afford mistakes, not when the Galaxy Council had eyes and ears everywhere. For weeks, they met in secret, planning their next move. Each member brought their own ideas to the table, but one thing was clear: humanity needed to act fast. The Council's grip on Earth was tightening, and if they didn't push back soon, it might be too late. Rachel Monroe stood at the center of it all. As a senator, she had spent years fighting for human rights within the Council system. But now, she saw the truth. The system was broken, and working within it wasn't enough. Her fiery speeches had earned her both admirers and enemies. But this time, she wasn't speaking to a crowd of politicians or reporters. She was speaking to a small group of people who shared her vision of freedom and equality for humanity. "We've been patient," Rachel said, pacing back and forth in the dimly lit bunker. "We followed their rules, paid their taxes, and done everything they asked. And what did we get in return? They stole our technology, silenced our voices, and treated us like children. Enough is enough." Her words hung heavy in the air. Everyone in the room nodded in agreement. Lavra Bennett, sitting quietly near the corner, felt a surge of pride. Rachel's passion reminded her of why they were doing this. It wasn't just about revenge or pride, it was about survival. If humanity didn't stand up now, the council would crush them completely. Daniel Carter leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Rachel's right," he said. "But we can't just charge them blindly. We need a strategy. Something that shows the council we're serious without giving them an excuse to wipe us out." Commander Grace Mitchell, a tall woman with sharp features and an even sharper mind, spoke up. "I agree. A direct attack isn't the answer, at least not yet. We need to hit them where it hurts, their resources. Without supplies, their power weakens." Grace's suggestion sparked a lively debate. Some argued that targeting the council's supply lines was too risky, while others thought it was the perfect way to send a message. In the end, they decided to go for it, but carefully. Adam Hayes, the tech billionaire, volunteered to design stealth drones capable of infiltrating council territory undetected. His expertise in cutting-edge technology would be crucial, while the team worked on logistics. Daniel and Dr. Ethan Cole focused on adapting remnants of Project Horizon into something usable. Though the council had shut down the project, Daniel had managed to salvage some of the data before it was locked away. With Ethan's help, they began building prototypes of advanced engines powered by black hole energy. These engines could revolutionize space travel, allowing ships to move faster and farther than ever before. If they succeeded, humanity would have a weapon the council couldn't match. Lavra played a different role. Using her experience as a diplomat, she gathered intelligence on the council's inner workings. She still had contacts within the council's headquarters on Lyria, people who weren't happy with how things were run. One of these contacts, a quiet alien scientist named Zara Voss, proved invaluable. Zara provided detailed maps of council facilities, including the location of key supply hubs. "Zara's risking a lot to help us," Lavra told the group during one of their meetings. "She believes in what we're doing. We can't let her down." As the days passed, the coalition grew stronger. More people joined their cause, bringing skills and resources that made their plans more feasible. Engineers, programmers, and even former soldiers offered their support. It wasn't just humans either. A few sympathetic aliens, tired of the council's tyranny, joined the fight as well. Despite the progress, tensions ran high. Everyone knew the risks. If the council discovered their plans, there would be no mercy. Arrests, executions, and even war were real possibilities. Still, no one backed down. They were united by a common goal: to protect humanity's future. One evening, as the team prepared for their first operation, Lavra found herself alone with Daniel. They sat together in the bunker's makeshift kitchen, sipping coffee and talking. Quietly, "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Lavra asked, her voice tinged with doubt. Daniel hesitated before answering. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know one thing. If we don't try, we'll regret it for the rest of our lives." Lavra smiled faintly. "You're right. It's just scary, you know? What if we fail?" "We won't," Daniel said firmly. "Not if we stick together." The night of the operation arrived sooner than anyone expected. Adam's stealth drones were ready, programmed to target a council supply hub orbiting the moon of Triton. The hub was heavily guarded, but its importance made it a prime target. Without it, the council's forces in the region would struggle to maintain their presence. Grace led the mission, guiding a small team of pilots through the darkness of space. The drones moved silently, slipping past patrols and disabling security systems with ease. Back on Earth, the rest of the coalition watched anxiously as updates streamed in. They're inside, Grace reported over the comms. Starting extraction now? Minutes felt like hours as the team worked to gather as much intel and equipment as possible. Then, just as they were about to leave, alarms blared. Someone had spotted them. "Move!" Grace ordered, her voice calm, but urgent. "Get out of there." The team scrambled to retreat, narrowly avoiding capture. As they fled, one of the drones detonated, destroying part of the hub in a spectacular explosion. The blast lit up the sky, visible even from Earth.news. Of the attack spread quickly. Across the galaxy, whispers of rebellion reached every corner. On Earth, celebrations erupted. People took to the streets, chanting slogans and waving flags. For the first time in decades, humanity felt alive again, but the Council wasn't pleased. Within hours, Councillor Kale, one of the most powerful members of the Council, issued a statement condemning the attack. "This act of aggression will not go unpunished," he declared. "Humanity has shown its true nature, reckless and untrustworthy. If they seek war, they shall have it." His words sent shockwaves through the coalition. War was exactly what they had hoped to avoid. But now it seemed inevitable. Rachel addressed the public shortly after Kale's announcement. Standing before a crowd of supporters, she spoke with unwavering confidence. "The Council calls us reckless, but we are not reckless, we are determined. They call us untrustworthy, but the only ones breaking trust are them. For years they have exploited us, silenced us, and tried to control us. No longer. Today we stand united. Today we fight for our place in the galaxy." Her speech ignited a firestorm of resistance. Protests erupted outside embassies of Council-aligned species, demanding justice for decades of oppression. Even some sympathetic aliens began defecting, offering intelligence and aid to the human cause. Back in the bunker, the coalition regrouped. The attack on Triton had been a success, but it was only the beginning. Now they had to prepare for the Council's retaliation. Daniel and Ethan worked tirelessly to refine their engine prototypes, knowing they would need every advantage they could get. Grace coordinated with military leaders to strengthen Earth's defenses, while Lavra continued gathering intelligence from her contacts. As the days turned into weeks, the galaxy braced for what was coming next. The Council deployed warships near Earth's borders, claiming it was a precautionary measure. But everyone knew the truth. They were preparing for war. Lavra looked out the window one night, watching the stars twinkle in the distance. She thought about everything they had accomplished so far and everything they still had to do. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but she believed in their cause. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for freedom. And freedom, she realized, was worth any price. The galaxy was on edge. The attack on the Council's supply hub near Triton had sent shockwaves through every star system. For the first time in decades, humanity wasn't just reacting to the Galaxy Council's decisions, it was acting. And the Council didn't like it one bit. Their response came swiftly and harshly. Warships began patrolling Earth's borders, their presence a constant reminder of the threat looming overhead. News outlets buzzed with speculation about what would happen next. Would the Council launch an all-out assault? Or were they simply trying to intimidate humanity into submission? In the Unity Coalition's underground bunker, the mood was tense but determined. Everyone knew the stakes had risen. What started as a small rebellion had grown into something much bigger. People across Earth and even some sympathetic aliens were rallying behind the coalition. But with that support came responsibility. Humanity couldn't afford to lose now. If they did, the Council would crush them completely. Daniel Carter spent most of his days hunched over blueprints and prototypes, working alongside Dr. Ethan Cole to perfect the engines they had salvaged from Project Horizon. The technology was revolutionary, capable of harnessing energy from black holes to power ships faster than anything the Council had ever seen. But building it wasn't easy. Every test revealed new challenges, forcing them to rethink their designs. Over and over again. "This is insane," Ethan muttered one evening, rubbing his temples as he stared at a malfunctioning engine core. We're trying to build something that shouldn't even exist yet. It has to work, Daniel replied firmly, not looking up from his calculations. If we don't have these engines, we're dead in the water. Ethan sighed but nodded. He knew Daniel was right. Without the engines, humanity wouldn't stand a chance against the Council's forces. They needed every advantage they could get. While Daniel and Ethan worked on the engines, Lavra Bennett focused on gathering intelligence. Her contact, Zara Voss, had become an invaluable ally, feeding her information about the Council's plans. One night, as Lavra reviewed the latest data Zaza had sent, her heart sank. The Council wasn't just planning to attack Earth, they were preparing to invade. Thousands of warships were being mobilized, ready to descend on Earth's atmosphere. Lavra immediately called an emergency meeting of the coalition. When everyone gathered in the bunker, she stood at the front of the room, her face pale but resolute. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "The Council is coming. Not just patrols or warnings and invasion. They mean to take control of Earth completely." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. If the Council succeeded, humanity would lose everything, its freedom, its dignity, its future. There was no turning back now. Commander Grace Mitchell spoke first. "Then we fight," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "They think we'll roll over and let them walk all over us. We show them they're wrong." Rachel Monroe nodded in agreement. "Grace is right. This isn't just about defending Earth anymore. It's about showing the galaxy that humanity won't be pushed around." But fighting wasn't enough. The coalition needed a plan, a way to strike back before the Council's fleet reached Earth. Adam Hayes suggested targeting another supply hub, this time closer to the Council's headquarters on Lyria. "If we hit them hard enough, we might buy ourselves some time," he explained. "And maybe weaken their resolve." The idea made sense, but it was risky. Lyria was heavily fortified, guarded by some of the Council's best soldiers, and the galaxy was at war. The Council's declaration of war against humanity had turned the simmering tension into an inferno. Earth's skies were filled with the hum of engines as fleets prepared for battle. On the ground, people worked tirelessly to support the war effort, building ships, manufacturing weapons, and training soldiers. No one was spared from the weight of what was happening. Everyone had a role to play, whether they were fighting in space or keeping the home front running. "Commander." Grace Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Eos, the flagship of humanity's new fleet. It was a sleek, powerful vessel equipped with the revolutionary engines Daniel Carter and Dr. Ethan Cole had developed. The engines gave the ship and others like it a speed and maneuverability that no Council ship could match. Grace knew this was their best chance to level the playing field. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were outmatched. The Council had centuries of experience in warfare, not to mention resources far beyond what humanity could muster. Grace turned to her crew, her voice calm but firm. "This isn't just about winning battles," she said. "It's about proving to the Council and to ourselves that we're capable of standing our ground. We've trained for this. We've prepared for this. Now it's time to show them who we are." Her words resonated with the crew, many of whom had volunteered knowing the risks. They weren't professional soldiers. Some were engineers, teachers, or farmers before the war began. But now they were united by a single purpose: to protect humanity's future. Meanwhile, Lavra Bennett worked behind the scenes, coordinating intelligence efforts and rallying support. Her contact, Zara Voss, continued to provide vital information about the Council's movements. Through Zara, Lavara learned that the Council planned to launch a massive assault on Earth within days. The attack would come from multiple fronts, overwhelming humanity's defenses and forcing surrender. Lavara shared the news with Rachel Monroe, who immediately called an emergency meeting of the Unity Coalition. When everyone gathered, Lavara explained the situation. "We don't have much time," she said. "If we wait for them to come to us, we'll lose. We need to take the fight to them." Rachel nodded. "Agreed, but how? Their forces are spread across the galaxy. We can't possibly hit all of them at once." Daniel spoke up, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "We focus on Lyria. If we strike directly at the Council's headquarters, we can disrupt their command structure. Without leadership, their forces will fall into chaos." It was a bold plan, perhaps too bold. Attacking the Council's seat of power meant going deep into enemy territory, where the odds were stacked heavily against them. But it was also their best chance to turn the tide of the war. Grace stepped forward. "I'll lead the mission," she said without hesitation. "We'll use the new engines to outmaneuver their defenses. If we move fast enough, we might actually pull this off." Rachel looked around the room, gauging the group's reaction. After a long pause, she nodded. "All right. Let's do it. But we need to be smart about this. Every detail matters." The plan came together quickly. Using data provided by Zara, Adam Hayes designed a route that would allow the fleet to approach Lyria undetected. Stealth technology cloaked the ships as they slipped past Council patrols. The journey was tense, with everyone aware that discovery would mean certain death. But the engines performed flawlessly, propelling the fleet faster than anyone had thought. Possible. As they neared Lyria, Grace divided her forces into two teams. One would remain in orbit, ready to engage any Council ships that tried to interfere. The other, led by Grace herself, would descend to the planet's surface and infiltrate the Council chambers. Among the ground team was Lavra, who insisted on joining despite objections from Daniel and others. "I'm not sitting this one out," Lavra had said firmly. "I've been working for this moment my entire career. I'm not letting someone else finish what we started." Reluctantly, they agreed. Laura's knowledge of Council politics and procedures made her an asset, and her determination was undeniable. The battle began as soon as the fleet entered Lyria's atmosphere. Council ships swarmed toward them, firing relentlessly. But the human fleet was faster, darting between attacks with precision that left their enemies struggling to keep up. In orbit, Commander Mitchell coordinated the defense, ensuring that the ground team could reach the surface safely. On the ground, Grace's team moved swiftly through the sprawling city surrounding the Council headquarters. The streets were eerily quiet, abandoned as the Council evacuated civilians ahead of the attack. As they approached the towering structure that housed the Council chambers, resistance grew fiercer. Guards patrolled every entrance, and automated turrets scanned for intruders. Grace signaled for silence as they crept closer. Using equipment designed by Adam, they disabled the security systems and slipped inside. The interior was a maze of corridors and locked doors, but Zara's maps guided them through. Finally, they reached the main chamber, where Councillor Kale and the rest of the Council were gathered. Kale stood at the center of the room, his expression one of icy disdain. "Did you really think you could win?" He sneered as Grace and her team burst in. "You're nothing but primitives playing at being civilized." Lavra stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "We're not primitives," she said. "We're humans. And we're done letting you dictate our future." Before Kale could respond, Ethan's team activated the final phase of their plan. Hidden devices planted throughout the building overloaded the Council's central command network, plunging the facility into chaos. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and communication systems went dark. The Council's leaders scrambled to regain control, but it was too late. Outside, the human fleet took advantage of the confusion to press their attack. Council ships, deprived of coordination, fell back in disarray. For the first time in the war, humanity had the upper hand, back in the Council chamber. Kale glared at Lavra, his arrogance replaced by fury. "This changes nothing," he spat. "You may have disrupted us today, but the galaxy will never accept you as equals." Lavra met his gaze unflinchingly. "Maybe not today, but we'll keep fighting until they do." With the Council's command structure in shambles, Grace ordered a retreat. The ground team regrouped and fought their way back to the ships, pursued by Council forces desperate to salvage the situation. By the time they reached orbit, the human fleet was already pulling away, leaving Lyria behind in turmoil. As the ships returned to Earth, the Coalition celebrated their victory. It wasn't total. The Council still controlled vast portions of the galaxy, but it was a turning point. For the first time, humanity had struck a decisive blow against their oppressors. The message was clear: they wouldn't back down. Rachel addressed the public once again, her voice filled with pride and determination. Today we proved that humanity is stronger than anyone believed. Stronger than the Council thought. Stronger than we even thought. But this isn't the end. There's still work to be done. Together we'll build a future where no one has to live under the shadow of tyranny. Daniel and Lavra sat together that night, watching the stars through the bunker's small window. They were exhausted but hopeful. The road ahead would still be long and difficult, but they had taken a crucial step forward. We did it, Daniel said softly, his voice tinged with awe. For now, Lavra replied. But there's more to come. This is just the beginning. And as they gazed at the endless expanse of the galaxy, they knew she was right. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, humanity had a real chance to shape its own destiny. The aftermath of the attack on Lyria rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. For centuries, the Galaxy Council had stood as an unshakable force, its authority unquestioned and absolute. But now, cracks were beginning to show. The Council's command network was in disarray, their leaders scattered and divided. Entire factions within the Council began to splinter, some accusing others of incompetence, while others quietly considered whether humanity might actually be worth negotiating. With on Earth the mood was electric. People celebrated in the streets, waving flags and lighting fireworks. The victory at Lyria wasn't just a military triumph. It was proof that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the most powerful forces in the galaxy. For the first time in decades, hope felt tangible. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about thriving. Rachel Monroe addressed a global audience from a hastily arranged stage in the heart of New York City. Her voice carried over loudspeakers, steady and strong. "This is not the end of our fight," she said, looking out at the sea of cheering faces. "But it is the start of something new, something better. Today we showed the galaxy what we're made of. We showed them that we will not bow to tyranny or fear. And tomorrow we'll keep showing them." Her words struck a chord. Across the planet, people listened intently, inspired by her vision of a brighter future. Even those who had doubted the Unity Coalition's chances were swept up in the tide of optimism. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival, it was fighting for a place among the stars, a chance to build a world where everyone had a voice. In the days following the battle, Daniel Carter and Dr. Ethan Cole worked tirelessly to refine their revolutionary engines. The prototypes used in the fleet had proven successful, but there was still room for improvement. If humanity hoped to maintain its newfound momentum, they needed every advantage they could get. Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes as he stared at the glowing screens surrounding him. "You know," he said, glancing at Daniel, "this feels surreal. I spent years dreaming about stuff like this technology that could change everything. And now, here we are, actually doing it." Daniel smiled faintly, his hands busy adjusting. "A complex array of circuits?" "Yeah, well, dreams don't mean much unless you make them real," he replied. "And right now, we need to make sure these engines stay ahead of whatever the Council throws at us next." Lavra Bennett joined them later that evening, carrying cups of coffee. She looked tired but determined, her mind still racing with thoughts of the Council's possible retaliation. "How's it going?" she asked, handing each of them a cup. "Slowly," Ethan admitted. "But we're getting there." "They won't give up easily," Lavra said, sitting down beside them. "Kale and his allies will regroup. They'll try to hit us harder next time. And we'll be ready," Daniel said firmly. "We've come too far to let them push us back now." While the engineers focused on technology, Commander Grace Mitchell coordinated efforts to strengthen Earth's defenses. The Council's invasion plan had been thwarted, but no one believed it was over. More ships would come, stronger and more numerous than before. Grace knew humanity couldn't afford to rely solely on surprise attacks and clever tactics. They needed a solid strategy and fast. She met with Rachel and other coalition leaders in the bunker, laying out a detailed plan. "We've got the engines," Grace explained, pointing to a holographic map of Earth's solar system. That gives us speed and mobility. But we also need fortified positions places where we can hold ground if they break through. Mars, Venus, even the moons of Jupiter, they're all potential strongholds, Rachel nodded thoughtfully. It's risky spreading ourselves thin, but you're right. We can't put all our eggs in one basket. What about resources? Can we sustain this kind of operation? Grace hesitated before answering, not indefinitely, but Adam's working on solutions. He's been reaching out to sympathetic aliens, trying to secure trade deals and supplies. He's good at what he does, Lava added. If anyone can pull it off, it's him. Adam Hayes was indeed making progress. Using his connections and charisma, he negotiated agreements with several alien species who had grown disillusioned with the Council's rule. Some provided raw materials, others offered advanced weaponry, and a few even sent volunteers to join humanity's ranks. Slowly but surely, Earth began building alliances that extended beyond its borders. One such ally was Zara Voss, the alien scientist who had risked everything to help humanity. She arrived on Earth shortly after the battle, at Lyria, eager to contribute however she could. Her knowledge of Council infrastructure proved invaluable, allowing the Coalition to identify weak points and plan future strikes. Zara stood alongside Lavra one evening, gazing at Earth's night sky through the bunker's window. "Your people amaze me," she said softly. "So many others would have given up long ago, but you fight," Lavra smiled faintly. "Not because we want to, but because we have to. Freedom isn't something you wait for, it's something you take." Zara nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps that's why you'll win." As weeks turned into months, the galaxy began to change. The Council's grip weakened further as more planets and species declared independence. Protests erupted across Council-controlled territories, demanding reforms and equality. Even some Council members began questioning whether their approach to governing was sustainable or just on Earth. Rachel pushed for diplomacy alongside defense. She reached out to neutral species and former Council allies, urging them to join humanity in creating a new order. "We don't want revenge," she told them during a live broadcast. "We want partnership. A galaxy where everyone has a say, not just the powerful few." Her message resonated. Slowly, a coalition of willing nations and species began to form, united by a shared vision of peace and cooperation. They called themselves the Galactic Accord, a name meant to symbolize unity and mutual respect. The Council didn't surrender easily. Sporadic skirmishes continued, and tensions remained high. But without centralized leadership, their efforts lacked coordination and purpose. Over time, their influence waned, replaced by the rising tide of resistance. Finally, after nearly a year of conflict, Councillor Kale agreed to negotiate. The meeting took place aboard a neutral space station with representatives from both sides, gathering around a large table. Kale looked older, wearier, his arrogance tempered by defeat. Across from him sat Rachel, flanked by Lavra, Daniel, and other coalition leaders. "This doesn't mean we forgive," Rachel said, her tone firm but measured. "What you did to us to countless others can't be undone. But we're willing to move forward if you are." Kale hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Very well, let us begin anew." Months later, the Galactic Accord held its first official assembly. Delegates from dozens of species gathered to discuss the future of the galaxy. Humanity took its rightful place among them, respected and valued for its contributions. It wasn't perfect, old prejudices lingered and challenges lay ahead, but it was a start. Back on Earth, Daniel and Lavra watched the ceremony on a screen in their living room. Their daughter, born during the war, slept peacefully in her crib nearby. "Do you think it'll last?" Lavra asked quietly. "I hope so," Daniel replied, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "But either way, we've done our part. The rest is up to them." Outside, the stars shone brightly against the night sky, endless and full of possibilities. Humanity had fought hard to claim its place among them, and finally it had succeeded.